My name's Harper, and I'm 32. I sat in a cold attorney's office, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, my hands wrapped tight around a worn notebook, its edges frayed from years of nervous clutching. I was still raw from losing my parents in a car crash 3 months ago, their absence a weight I carried in my bones. I thought I was there to hear about their will, maybe inherit a piece of their love, a photo album, a letter, something to hold on to. But when Mr. Hargrove slid that folder across his polished desk, his face blank as stone, my name wasn't there. Just my brother's. Everything, the house, the savings, the family store went to Caleb. Nothing for me. I felt my breath catch the room tilting slightly like the world had slipped off its axis. Have you ever felt your heart crack open like that, betrayed by the ones you loved most? Drop a like. If you've been blindsided by family, subscribe to hear how I faced it, and let me know where you're watching from. I sat frozen in that attorney's office, the air heavy with the stale scent of old paper and bitter coffee grounds. Mr. Hargrove's voice was flat mechanical, like he was reading a grocery list off a crumpled receipt. "Your parents left everything to Caleb," he said, adjusting his tie. "The house, the savings, the family hardware store. All of it." I blinked, my fingers tightening on the folder, waiting for him to backtrack to say my name was buried somewhere in those crisp pages. "Is there a mistake?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, thin as the threadbare carpet under my feet. He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the desk, avoiding mine. "Their instructions were clear, Harper," he said, his pen tapping a relentless rhythm, each click echoing my racing pulse. I'd spent years helping at the store, balancing their books until midnight, skipping weekends to untangle their financial messes while my own dreams gathered dust. And now nothing. Not a single note. Not a chipped mug. Nothing to say. I'd mattered. My throat burned as I grabbed my bag, mumbling a thank you that tasted like ash, and stumbled out into the parking lot. The asphalt shimmered under the noon sun heat, rising in waves, and my hands shook so hard I dropped my keys twice before finding the lock. I slid into my car, the cracked leather seat creaking its familiar squeak, a small anchor in the chaos. I pulled out the photo of my parents tucked in the visor, their smiles frozen at a 4th of July barbecue. Mom's arm around Dad, their laughter caught in time. I traced their faces with my fingertip, my throat tightening until it hurt to swallow. Did I miss something? Was I not enough for you? My phone buzzed sharp and jarring, snapping me out of the haze. A text from Caleb. "Hey, dinner tonight. My treat." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering the words, blurring through unshed tears. He didn't know I knew. He was probably sipping an overpriced latte somewhere, planning how to spend his fortune, while I sat here piecing together why I'd been erased from our family's story. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, ignoring the ping of another message. In the folder still clutched in my lap, I noticed a yellow post-it stuck to the back of a page in Mom's looping familiar handwriting. "For Caleb's future," it read. Just 3 words, sharp as a blade, cutting deeper than the legal jargon. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, the horn giving a weak, accidental beep before I pulled back, my breath hitching. My parents had always leaned toward Caleb, the new bike, when I got his rusty hand-me-down, the college fund they stretched for him, but not for me. But this was a rewriting of our history, like I'd never been part of their heart. I started the car, the engine sputtering before it caught the vibrations, steadying my trembling hands. I didn't know where I was driving, but I couldn't stay in that lot. Couldn't keep staring at that post-it, those words that made me feel like a stranger in my own family. My phone buzzed again, Caleb's name glowing on the screen, but I let it slip to voicemail, the silence in the car louder than any excuse he could offer. I drove aimlessly, the city lights smearing into streaks of gold and red through my windshield, the world outside a blur of motion. My apartment was only 10 minutes away, but I took the long route winding past the old park where Dad used to push me on the swings, the chains creaking as I soared. I needed time to think, to stitch together the hole in my chest, raw and gaping. When I finally pulled into my parking spot, the street lamp flickering above my phone was heavy with missed calls. 3 from Caleb, 1 from Aunt Sheila, her name a quiet sting. I ignored them all, climbing the stairs to my place. The familiar creak of the third step, a fleeting comfort. Inside, I dropped my bag on the floor, the thud echoing in the dim room, and sank onto the couch, its springs groaning under me. The silence of my apartment was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I reached for a box under the coffee table, one I'd kept since moving out years ago, its cardboard soft from time. It held letters, birthday cards, scraps of my parents' love I'd clung to like lifelines. Maybe there was something in there, a clue to why they'd done this, a thread to pull me back to them. My fingers sifted through faded envelopes, pulling out a card from Mom for my 25th birthday. The ink smudged from being held too often. To our Harper, always so strong, it read. I'd carried those words like a shield through late nights at the store, through every sacrifice I made to keep the family afloat, paying bills, fixing leaks, holding them together. But now they felt like a lie, hollow, as the empty promises they'd left me. I dug deeper, my breath shallow, and found a letter from Mom to Caleb, tucked in by mistake, dated from when he'd started his first job, the one he quit after 6 months to chase a band. You're our pride, she wrote. Your ambition will carry us all. I searched for something like that for me, a letter, a note, anything to balance the scales. But there was nothing, just photos of Caleb's graduation, his first car, his life framed in their affection. My hands trembled as I set the box aside, the weight of their absence pressing down heavier than the cardboard itself. I wasn't just left out of the will, I was left out of their story, a footnote in their love for him. My phone lit up again, Caleb's name flashing like a warning. I answered this time, my voice sharp, cutting through the quiet. What do you want? He sounded cheerful, oblivious, his voice bright with the ease of someone untouched by loss. Just checking in, he said. You didn't reply about dinner. I gripped the phone, my knuckles white, the plastic creaking in my hand. Did you know about the will? I asked, each word a stone. A pause, then a casual, yeah, they mentioned it. It's what they wanted, Harper. I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound that startled me. Mentioned it. You knew I'd get nothing, and you didn't say a word. He sighed. Like I was the one being difficult, his tone dripping with patience. You're making this bigger than it is, he said. Let's talk at dinner. I hung up, my heart pounding, the room spinning slightly. Aunt Sheila's voicemail came next, her voice soft but firm, like she was coaxing a child. Harper, I know you're upset, but Caleb needs this more. You're strong, you'll be fine. I deleted it, my jaw tight. The word fine, a knife twisting deeper. Fine. I'd been fine when I paid their electric bill with my last paycheck, fine when I skipped my own dreams to keep their store running. But now I wasn't fine. I stood pacing the small living room, my shadow sharp against the peeling wallpaper. My reflection caught in the window eyes, red hair tangled, but there was something else, a spark of anger I'd buried for years flickering to life. I grabbed my keys again, the metal cold in my palm, not sure where I was headed, but knowing I couldn't stay still, trapped in this silence. Caleb's dinner invite hung in my mind, a chance to face him, to demand answers that might never come. I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I couldn't keep running from this truth, ugly and raw as it was. I pulled into the diner's gravel lot, the neon sign buzzing above the entrance like a trapped insect. My hands were still shaky from Caleb's call, his voice echoing in my head, so casual. Like I was the one blowing things out of proportion. I'd agreed to this dinner not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see his face to know if he truly believed I deserved nothing. The diner smelled of grease and overbrewed coffee, the kind of place we used to come to as kids for milkshakes after soccer games, the jukebox humming in the corner. Caleb was already at a booth scrolling on his phone, his pressed shirt crisp under the fluorescent lights, looking every bit the golden boy. He glanced up, flashed a grin that didn't reach his eyes, and waved me over like nothing was wrong. I slid into the seat across from him, my purse thudding against the red vinyl, the sound swallowed by the clatter of dishes. You okay? He asked, farly looking up from his menu, his fingers tapping the laminated edge. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms, leaving half-moons in my skin. Okay, I said, my voice low, trembling with the effort to stay calm. You knew about the will, Caleb. You knew they left me nothing. He set the menu down, his smile fading just a fraction a crack in his polished facade. "Look, Harper, it's not like I wrote it," he said, his tone light like he was explaining the weather. Mom and Dad had their reasons. I leaned forward, my heart pounding so loud I thought he'd hear it. "And what were those reasons that I worked myself to the bone for them while you chased your big dreams?" His eyes narrowed, but he kept his voice even like he was humoring a child. "You're being dramatic," he said. "They trusted me to handle things. You don't need the money, you're fine." Fine. That word hit like a slap, sharp and stinging. I wanted to scream, to flip the table, send his soda crashing to the floor, but I just sat there, my breath shallow, trapped in my chest. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes and a name tag reading Tina, came by, her apron stained with ketchup. I muttered something about a burger, my voice distant, barely hearing myself over the roar in my head. Caleb ordered his usual steak and fries, his voice loud, confident, then launched into a monologue about his plans. "I'm thinking of expanding the store," he said, leaning back like a king surveying his kingdom. "Maybe open a second location. The house needs some work, but it's got good bones." I stared at him, my stomach twisting into knots, his words piling on like bricks. He was already spending it, already living the life they'd handed him on a silver platter, while I was scraping by in a one-bedroom with a faucet that dripped all night. Did you ever think to ask them why I cut in, my voice sharper than I meant, slicing through his chatter? "Why they cut me out?" he shrugged, sipping his soda, the ice clinking against the glass. "It's just how it is, Harper. They knew I'd take care of things." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound that echoed in the booth. "Take care of things? Like how you left me to handle the store's taxes while you were off at music festivals, living your best life?" His jaw tightened, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. But before he could answer, my phone buzzed, Aunt Sheila's name flashing. I ignored it, my eyes catching on Caleb's wrist where Dad's old watch glinted under the diner's lights, its scratched face winking at me. That watch with its worn leather strap was supposed to be mine. Dad promised it when I was 16, said it'd be mine when he was gone, a piece of him to carry. Seeing it on Caleb felt like theft, another shard of my history stolen. I opened my mouth to call it out, but Tina returned, setting down our plates with a clunk, her eyes flicking between us, catching the tension like a storm brewing. She lingered a second longer, her hand brushing the table, and I wondered if she saw it the way I was unraveling. I looked away. My burger untouched, the weight of Caleb's nonchalance crushing me, his voice droning on about paint colors for the house, while my whole life felt rewritten by a choice I couldn't fathom. I pushed my plate away, the smell of the burger turning my stomach, the grease slick on the air. Caleb was still talking, his fork waving as he described new signage for the store, his voice bright like we were just catching up over coffee on a Sunday morning. I couldn't take it anymore. I leaned across the table, my voice low but steady, each word carved from the ache inside me. "You're wearing Dad's watch," I said. "The one he promised me." Caleb froze mid-bite, his eyes flicking to his wrist, the watch catching the light like a taunt. He set his fork down, leaning back with a sigh, the booth creaking under his weight. "Yeah," he said, his tone flat. "They thought it suited me better." "Suited you better?" I repeated, my voice cracking, a fault line breaking open. "It was mine, Caleb." He looked at me, his expression a mix of pity and annoyance, like I was a kid whining over a toy. "Harper, it's just a watch," he said. "You're getting hung up on little things." "Little things?" I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, the cheap wood slick under my palms. "You got everything. The house, the store, their trust. And I get nothing, not even a damn keepsake." He rolled his eyes, a gesture so familiar, it stung like I was still the little sister he could dismiss. "You need to let this go," he said. "It's not about you." I felt the air leave my lungs like he'd punched me, the diner's hum fading to a dull roar. Not about me. I'd spent years keeping the family together, staying up late to balance their books, driving Mom to doctor's appointments, when she was too weak to go alone, her hand frail in mine. And it wasn't about me. Tina passed by again, her tray clattering, her lips pressed tight as she shot me a glance like she saw the pieces of me falling apart. I stood my chair, scraping against the linoleum loud enough to turn heads from nearby tables. "I'm done." I said, my voice louder than I meant, trembling with the weight of it all. Done pretending this is okay. Caleb leaned forward, his voice sharp now, cutting through the diner's chatter. Sit down, Harper. You're making a scene. A scene, I laughed, a harsh, broken sound that echoed in my chest. You're living in their house wearing their promises, and I'm the one making a scene. He shook his head like I was hopeless, a lost cause. You always do this, he said, his voice low, venomous. You make everything about you. I wanted to scream to tell him he was wrong, that I'd given everything, but the words caught in my throat, tangled in rage and hurt. Instead, I grabbed my purse, the strap digging into my shoulder, and walked out the diner door, slamming behind me, the glass rattling in its frame. The night air was cold, biting at my exposed arms as I stood in the lot, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Aunt Sheila's name glowing on the screen. I answered, too raw to care, my voice shaking. Harper, she said, her tone soft, like she was soothing a wounded animal. I heard you're upset about the will. Caleb's got big plans, he needs the support. You're stronger than this. Stronger, I whispered, my voice breaking, barely audible over the hum of passing cars. I've been strong my whole life, Sheila. When does it stop? She hesitated, her breath crackling through the phone, then said, Your parents loved you, but Caleb's their legacy. I hung up my hand, trembling so hard I nearly dropped the phone, the screen cold against my palm. Legacy. That word burned, carving a deeper wound than the will itself, a scar I could feel spreading. I climbed into my car, the engine roaring to life, but I didn't drive. I just sat there staring at the diner's neon lights. Caleb's silhouette still in the booth, laughing with Tina now, like our fight was nothing, a fleeting inconvenience. My whole life I'd been the one who stayed, who fixed things, who loved them through every mess, every crisis, every tear. And they'd chosen him. They'd chosen him, and I was left with nothing but questions that cut deeper with every answer I chased. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt like a hammer against my skull, pounding in time with my pulse. My apartment was too quiet. The kind of silence that amplifies every thought, makes them scream. After the diner, I'd driven home in a fog. Caleb's words looping in my head, legacy. Not about you, let it go, like a song I couldn't stop hearing. I couldn't let it go. I needed something, anything, to understand why my parents had erased me from their final wishes. So I decided to go to their house, now Caleb's, to pick up a box of my old things I'd left in the attic years ago when I moved out. Maybe there'd be a piece of them I could hold on to, something to make sense of this void. I pulled up to the familiar brick house, the front yard, already showing signs of neglect, weeds creeping through the flower beds. Mom used to tend with such care, her hands always dusted with soil. Caleb's car, a shiny new SUV, sat in the driveway, a glaring symbol of his inheritance. I knocked, the sound echoing in the still morning, but no one answered, so I used my spare key, the one I'd kept since high school, its edges worn smooth. Inside, the air smelled of fresh paint and sawdust, sharp and unfamiliar. Caleb had started remodeling, tearing out the oak cabinets Dad built by hand, their warm grain replaced by sleek modern ones that felt cold wrong. It was like he was erasing them, erasing us, rewriting the house into something that didn't know me. I climbed the attic stairs, each step creaking under my weight, the sound loud in the empty house. I found my box, a battered cardboard thing labeled Harper. In my teenage scrawl, the ink faded but still mine. I sat cross-legged on the dusty floor, the air thick with the musty scent of old wood, and sifted through its contents: old report cards with teachers' praise, a friendship bracelet from summer camp, a photo of me and Mom baking cookies, flour smudged on her cheek. My chest ached, a dull, heavy pain, but it wasn't enough to fill the gap. I needed more, something to explain why I'd been left behind. I started poking through other boxes, ones stacked in the corner marked miscellaneous in Mom's neat handwriting. That's when I found it, a leather-bound book I'd given Dad for Father's Day years ago when I was 15, my savings spent on its smooth cover, hoping he'd fill it with his thoughts. Tucked inside was an envelope, my name written on it in his slanted, careful script. My heart stopped a thud in my chest so loud, I glanced around, half expecting someone to hear it. I tore the envelope open, my hands trembling, and unfolded a single sheet of paper, its edges soft from time. "Harper," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I owe you the truth. We chose Caleb because he carries the family name, our legacy. You're strong, you don't need this, but he does. I'm sorry." I read it again, then a third time, the words blurring as my eyes burned tears I didn't want to shed spilling onto the page. Legacy. That's why they left me nothing. Because I was a daughter, not a son, not the one to carry their name forward. I clutched the letter, my breath hitching, and felt something break inside me, a crack so deep it echoed in my bones. All those years I'd spent proving myself, working harder, loving deeper, staying when Caleb left. And it came down to this. A choice made before I was even born, a truth that reduced me to an afterthought. I heard footsteps below, Caleb's voice calling out, "Harper, you here?" I froze, the letter crumpled in my fist, its edges biting into my palm. He was coming up the stairs, his boots heavy on the wood. Each step a countdown. I shoved the letter into my pocket, my pulse racing, not ready to face him, not with this truth burning through me like fire. The attic door creaked open, and there he was, his face a mix of surprise and suspicion, his eyes scanning the open boxes, the dust stirred by my search. "What are you doing up here?" he asked, his voice sharp, like I'd trespassed in his kingdom. I stood, my legs shaky, the floorboards creaking beneath me, and forced my voice to stay even. "Just getting my stuff," I said, but inside I was screaming, the letter's words echoing, "You don't need this. You don't need this," a chant that tore me apart. Caleb's eyes narrowed, catching the way my hand hovered near my pocket where Dad's letter burned against my thigh, its weight heavier than the attic's dust. "You're not just getting your stuff," he said, stepping closer, his voice edged with accusation, his shadow falling across the slanted ceiling. "You're snooping." I backed up, the low beams making me feel caged, the air thick with the scent of old wood and betrayal. "Snooping," I said, my voice shaking, barely holding together. "This is my family too, Caleb. Or did you forget that?" He laughed, a sharp cutting sound that echoed in the cramped space, and crossed his arms, his posture all confidence. "Your family, Harper. You're acting like you're owed something." Mom and Dad made their choice clear as day. I felt the letter's weight, its words clawing at me, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I pulled it out, holding it up like evidence, my hands trembling so hard the paper shook. "Then explain this," I said, my voice breaking, raw and jagged. "Dad's letter saying they chose you because you're the son, the legacy." I hated how small I sounded, how the words trembled, exposing every crack in me. Caleb's face shifted, a flicker of unease crossing his eyes, but then he shrugged, like it was nothing, a minor detail. "That's how they saw it," he said, his voice calm, dismissive. "You're tough. You'll get over it. Tough." I stepped forward, my chest tight with rage, the attic's walls closing in. I was tough when I worked double shifts to keep their store afloat, my eyes burning from spreadsheets. I was tough when I held Mom's hand through chemo, her fingers cold in mine while you were too busy being their pride. His fiancée Lila appeared at the attic door, her arms crossed, her blonde hair pulled tight, her voice dripping with disdain. "Harper, stop it," she said, her words sharp, cutting through the dust. "You're jealous, and it's pathetic. You're making Caleb feel guilty for something he didn't do." I turned to her, my vision blurring with tears, my breath ragged. "Jealous," I whispered the word, barely escaping. "They left me nothing, Lila. Not a dime, not a memory. And you think I'm the one who's pathetic?" She rolled her eyes, a gesture that felt like a slap, and Caleb put a hand on her shoulder like they were a united front, a wall against me. "This is why they didn't trust you with it," he said, his voice cold now, each word deliberate. "You're too emotional, too caught up in your own head." I staggered back the attic, spinning their words, hitting like blows, each one heavier than the last. Emotional, I'd given everything, every ounce of my heart, every sleepless night, and it wasn't enough. I pushed past them, the letter crumpled in my fist, my shoulder brushing Lila's as I stumbled down the stairs, the air thick with the scent of paint. Outside, I ran to the park across the street, the one where I'd played as a kid, the swing still creaking in the distance. I collapsed under an oak tree, its branches heavy with summer leaves, the night dark, the stars hidden by clouds. I sobbed, my voice raw, screaming into the dark. Why didn't you love me? My words were swallowed by the wind, the letter falling from my hand, landing in the dirt. I curled into myself, my body shaking, my heart shattered with nowhere left to go. The world silent except for the ache that consumed me. I woke up on the park bench, my neck stiff, the morning air sharp against my skin, carrying the faint scent of dew and cut grass. Dad's letter was still in my pocket, crumpled but intact, its words seared into me like a brand. I'd cried until there was nothing left, my voice hoarse, my body hollow, my clothes damp from the night's chill. But as I sat there watching the sunrise paint the sky in streaks of pink and gold, the light catching the edges of the oak leaves, something shifted inside me, subtle but real. I was done begging for scraps of love that were never mine to claim. I needed to take control, to stop letting their choices define who I was. Back at my apartment, I brewed coffee. The familiar ritual grounding me, the machine's gurgle, a steady rhythm against the morning quiet. My laptop sat on the kitchen counter next to a stack of unopened mail envelopes gathering dust. I'd been avoiding them, too raw to face bills or reminders of the life I'd lost. But now I pulled the pile toward me, sorting through junk flyers and overdue notices, my fingers smudged with ink. One envelope stood out from the bank that held my parents' mortgage, its logo stark against the white paper. I tore it open, my pulse quickening, the sound of ripping paper loud in the still room. It was a statement, my name listed as co-signer, a responsibility I'd taken on years ago when Dad's health faltered, his cough echoing through the house. The balance glared at me, thousands I was expected to help pay, even now when I'd inherited nothing but their silence. I stared at it, anger bubbling up hot and sharp. Caleb assumed I'd keep covering it, didn't he? Just like he assumed I'd stay quiet, stay the strong one, always picking up the pieces. I grabbed my phone and searched for a lawyer, someone new, not Mr. Hargrove with his cold eyes and relentless pen. I found Ms. Porter, a woman with a no-nonsense website and reviews praising her empathy, her ability to listen. I booked an appointment for that afternoon, my hands steady for the first time in days, the decision feeling like a lifeline. Her office was a small space, warm with soft lighting and a fern in the corner, its leaves brushing the window. Ms. Porter listened as I poured out the story. The will, the letter, the mortgage, my voice cracking but steadying as I spoke. She leaned forward, her glasses slipping down her nose, her eyes kind but sharp. "Harper," she said, her voice calm, "if you're not benefiting from the estate, you don't have to carry its burdens. You can withdraw as co-signer. It's your right." I blinked, the idea sparking something alive in me, a flicker of power I hadn't felt before. "Withdraw," I asked, my voice soft, testing the word. "Just walk away," she nodded, pulling out a form, the paper crisp under her fingers. "It's straightforward," she said. "You're not obligated to pay for a house you don't own." I sat back, my mind racing, the fern's shadow dancing on the wall. Walking away felt like a betrayal of Mom and Dad, of the home where we'd carved pumpkins on the porch, where I'd learned to braid my hair. But hadn't they betrayed me first? Choosing Caleb over me? I thought of his new SUV gleaming in their driveway, his plans to remodel, all built on the assumption I'd keep footing the bill. No more. I looked at Ms. Porter, my voice firm, a new edge to it. "Let's do it," I said. "I want out." She smiled, a small, knowing curve of her lips, and handed me a pen, its weight solid in my hand. As I signed the first form, my signature bold and deliberate, my heart pounded not with fear, but with a quiet growing strength, like a tide turning. I wasn't just signing papers. I was rewriting my story, one where I chose myself, where I stepped out of their shadow and into my own light. Ms. Porter's office felt like a sanctuary, the soft hum of her desk fan cutting through the weight of my decision, its breeze stirring papers on her desk. I signed the final form, my signature bold against the stark white paper, each stroke a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. But the mortgage wasn't the only tie I needed to sever. I asked about the utilities, the ones I'd been paying for years to keep the family home running, gas for the furnace that warmed Mom's late-night reading, electric for the porch light Dad left on for me. Ms. Porter raised an eyebrow, flipping through her notes, her pen pausing. "You're on those accounts too?" she asked, her voice tinged with surprise. I nodded, my jaw tight, the truth settling heavy. Gas, electric, even the water bill, all in my name, all assumed to be my burden, like I'd signed up to carry their lives forever. She shook her head, pulling up another set of forms, the printer whirring softly in the background. "We can transfer those out," she said, her tone matter of fact. "You're not responsible for a property you don't own." I hesitated, my pen hovering, the ink gleaming in the light. Those bills were small routine, the kind of thing I'd handled without thinking, autopay draining my account while I barely noticed. But they were chains tethering me to a life I'd been written out of, a role I'd played without question. I signed, my hand steadier now, each form a step toward freedom, the paper crinkling under my grip. Back home, I called the bank to check my accounts, expecting the usual low balance, the numbers always tight. But a clerk, her voice clipped but kind, mentioned an old savings account one mom opened when I was a kid. Forgotten in the chaos of their passing, its existence buried in paperwork. It had a few $1,000s, not much, but mine untouched by their will. I sat on my couch, the phone still in my hand, the fabric rough under my fingers, and felt a spark of possibility, a faint glow in the dark. It wasn't just money. It was proof they'd once thought of me, even if they'd stopped a fragment of care I could claim. I decided to see a therapist, someone to help me untangle the knots of guilt and anger twisting inside me. I found Dr. Hayes online, her profile promising a focus on family dynamics, her photo showing a warm smile. My first session was the next day in a cozy office with a quilt on the couch. Its patches faded but soft. I told her about the will, the letter, the years I'd spent trying to earn my parents' pride, my voice spilling out like water from a cracked dam. She listened, her eyes kind but unflinching, her notepad resting untouched. "Harper," she said, "you've been carrying their choices like they're your fault. What if you let yourself be enough?" Her words hit hard, like a door swinging open, letting light into a room. I'd kept dark. I left her office lighter, not healed, but awake, the world sharper around me. That night my phone rang, Caleb's name flashing urgent and bright. I answered, ready this time, my voice steady. "Harper, what the hell?" He snapped, his voice frayed, not the smooth charm I knew. "The bank called about the mortgage. What did you do?" I took a breath, the air cool in my lungs, and said, "I'm not paying for your house, Caleb. It's yours, all of it. Deal with it." He started to argue, his words tumbling over each other, but I hung up, my heart racing not with fear, but with clarity, sharp and clean. I walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the city lights twinkling below my reflection, sharp in the glass, eyes clear, shoulders square. I'd spent years trying to be their anchor, their fixer, their daughter, always reaching for a love they'd rationed. Now I was just Harper, and that was enough. I turned off the phone, set it on the counter with a soft clink, and stood there. The silence around me, not empty but full, like the first deep breath after a storm, the air alive with possibility. A month passed, and the world felt different, like I'd shed a skin I didn't know I was wearing, its weight gone from my shoulders. My apartment was still small. The faucet still dripped a steady plink against the sink, but I'd started painting the walls a soft blue, the brushstrokes uneven, but mine claiming the space as my own. I was at the kitchen table, sorting through job applications, my laptop humming softly, when my phone pinged with a text from Mom's old number, now Caleb's. "Mortgage due." It read the words, blunt, expectant. "Can you cover it?" I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold, the mug's handle smooth under my thumb. He hadn't spoken to me since I'd hung up on him, since I'd pulled my name from every account tied to that house. The mortgage, the utilities, the invisible threads I'd let bind me. I typed back, "Not mine," and hit send, my fingers steady, the action final. The reply came fast, a string of question marks, then nothing, the silence louder than any argument. I set the phone down, my pulse quick, but not panicked, a calm certainty settling in. I'd expected anger, a call, maybe a confrontation, but this quiet was heavier, a void where his demands used to live. Days later, I met Jocelyn at a coffee shop, the air thick with the scent of espresso and warm pastries. She'd run into Caleb at the grocery store, his cart half empty, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "He looked rough," she said, stirring her latte, her spoon clinking against the cup. Muttering about bills piling up the store, struggling orders, delayed customers walking away. I'd always been the one to smooth those kinks, chasing down suppliers at dawn, soothing angry clients with a smile I didn't feel. Now, without me, the cracks were showing, the store's pulse faltering. I nodded, stirring my tea, the steam curling around my fingers, and said little. But inside, I felt a strange mix of relief and ache, like pulling a splinter free, but missing its sting. I didn't want Caleb to fail, not really. But I wasn't his safety net anymore, not the one to catch what he let fall. Aunt Sheila called next, her voice tight, asking me to meet at her place for a family sit-down, her tone carrying the weight of expectation. I agreed, not sure why, maybe to see how far my choice had rippled, how deep the waves had cut. Her house smelled of cinnamon and laundry. The kind of place that used to feel like home, with its faded curtains and worn rugs. She greeted me with a stiff hug, her arms quick, her eyes searching mine for something I wasn't giving. Caleb was there, slouched on her floral couch. His usual charm dulled his shirt, wrinkled his hands restless. "You really did it," he said, not looking at me, his voice flat like he was stating a fact. "Pulled out of everything." I sat across from him, my hands folded in my lap, the couch's fabric scratchy under my fingers, and said, "Yeah, I did. It's your house, your store. You wanted it all, you've got it." He rubbed his face, his stubble rasping, and for a second, I saw the brother I'd once idolized, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike, his hands steady on the handlebars. But then Sheila spoke, her tone sharp, cutting through the memory. "Harper, this isn't just about you," she said, her hands clasped tight around her mug. "The family's struggling. You can't just walk away." I looked at her, my throat tight, her words stirring a familiar guilt I pushed down. "I didn't walk away," I said, my voice quiet but firm, each word deliberate. "I was pushed out." The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a held breath, thick with the weight of truth, and I realized they hadn't expected me to stand my ground, not like this, not with this calm, unyielding strength. The silence in Aunt Sheila's living room stretched heavy as a fog rolling in from the coast. Caleb stared at the floor, his fingers picking at a loose thread on the couch, unraveling it slowly, his hands betraying his unease. Sheila shifted in her chair, her coffee mug untouched, steam curling into the air like a ghost of our old conversations. Then Cousin Nate walked in, his boots scuffing the hardwood, breaking the tension like a stone through glass. He nodded at me, his face softer than I expected, his eyes carrying a quiet understanding. "Heard about the store," he said to Caleb, his tone casual but pointed like a dart finding its mark. "Suppliers are pulling out. You got a plan?" Caleb's head snapped up, his eyes sharp, defensive. "It's under control," he said, but his voice cracked, a fracture in his usual confidence betraying him. Nate sat leaning back in a creaky chair and glanced at me, his expression steady. "Harper kept that place running," he said, his words slow, deliberate. "You're feeling it now, aren't you?" I froze, not expecting his words, not expecting anyone to see my absence as a wound, a gap in the machine I'd kept turning for years. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer, his silence louder than any defense. Sheila cleared her throat, her voice softer now, almost pleading, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Harper, she said your parents would have wanted us to stick together. You could help just a little." I looked at her, at the lines etched deep in her face, the worry in her eyes, and felt a pang. Not guilt, but sorrow for the family we'd lost. "They didn't stick by me." I said, my words quiet but firm, cutting through the room's warmth. "They chose Caleb. I'm choosing me." Nate's eyes met mine, a small nod, like he saw the weight I'd carried and the strength it took to set it down. Caleb stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, the sound jarring, and walked to the window, his back to us, his silhouette sharp against the fading dusk. I waited for him to argue, to throw blame like he always did, but he just stood there, staring out at the street, his shoulders slumped. The room felt smaller, the air thick with things, unsaid regrets, and truths hanging between us. I thought of the store, the shelves I'd stocked with care, the customers I'd greeted by name, their smiles a small reward for my work. It was failing without me, and part of me wanted to step in to fix it like I always had to be the one who made things right. But I stayed still, my hands clasped tight, the skin warm where my fingers pressed together. Sheila tried again, her voice trembling, barely holding steady. "Your family, Harper. Family doesn't do this." I looked at her, my chest heavy, and said, "Family doesn't cut you out and expect you to keep giving." She looked away, her lips pressed thin, her eyes glistening. Nate spoke up, his tone low-measured. "Caleb's been selling off inventory cheap," he said, his words landing like stones. "Trying to cover the mortgage. I heard it from a guy at the bank." Caleb turned his face pale, his eyes wide, but he didn't deny it, didn't fight back. The truth hung there raw and undeniable, a mirror to the choices they'd all made. I'd stepped back, and their world was crumbling, the foundation I'd built now gone. I stood, my purse in hand, the leather strap cool against my palm, and walked to the door, my steps slow, deliberate. No one stopped me, their silence following me out. Outside, the evening was cool, the streetlights flickering on, casting long shadows across the pavement. I climbed into my car, the engine's hum steadying me, a familiar comfort. I didn't feel triumph, just a quiet, aching clarity, like seeing the world through a lens finally in focus. I'd lit a match, not to burn them, but to free myself, and now we were all watching the smoke rise, curling into the twilight. I moved into a new apartment last week, a tiny place with big windows that let the morning sun spill across the hardwood, warming the floor under my bare feet. It's not much, but I hung my own sketches on the walls, bright watercolors of places I've never been. Rolling hills, quiet beaches, dreams I'm starting to claim. I was unpacking a box of books, their spines worn from years of reading, when I found a small wooden frame, one I'd made in high school shop class. Its edges crooked, the varnish uneven from my clumsy teenage hands. I smiled, running my thumb over its rough surface, a piece of me I'd forgotten, one that didn't need anyone's approval to exist. I set it on the shelf, empty for now, a promise to fill it with something new, something mine. That afternoon, I drove to a lake just outside town, a spot I'd found on a whim while scrolling maps online. Its name unfamiliar, but inviting. The water was still reflecting the clouds like a mirror, their edges soft in the late light. I carried a small pouch of wildflower seeds I'd bought at a garden store, their colors vivid through the plastic. I knelt by the shore, the grass cool and damp against my knees, and scattered the seeds, letting them drift into the soil, carried by a gentle breeze. It wasn't for Mom or Dad, not even for Caleb. It was for me, a quiet ritual to mark the space I was carving out, a life where I could breathe without their weight. As I watched the seeds settle, I thought about my last session with Dr. Hayes, her office warm with the scent of chamomile tea. We talked about family, how I'd spent so long chasing their version of love, running toward a finish line they'd moved. "You're not just their daughter," she'd said, her voice steady, her eyes locked on mine. "You're Harper, and that's a whole world." I'd nodded, the words sinking in like seeds, finding earth, rooting deep. Back at the lake, a breeze stirred, rippling the water, breaking the clouds' reflection into shimmering fragments, and I felt it, a lightness I hadn't known in years, a loosening of the knots in my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket, an email from Caleb, the subject line. Just my name, stark and simple. I opened it, my heart steady, no longer racing at his name. He wrote about the store, how he was trying to save it. His words careful, almost fragile, asking if we could talk, maybe start over. I didn't reply, not yet, the decision heavy but not urgent. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I didn't hate him either, the anger softening into something quieter, less sharp. I tucked the phone away, my eyes on the lake, the seeds hidden now, waiting for spring to bloom. I stood brushing dirt from my hands, the earth clinging to my fingers, and walked the shore, my steps slow, each one a choice to keep going, to build a life that was mine alone, unshackled from their expectations. I drove back from the lake, the car's hum blending with the soft static of the radio, a country song I didn't know fading in and out. Caleb's email lingered in my mind, a quiet question I'd answer later, or maybe not at all. At home, I brewed tea, the steam curling under my chin as I sat at my new desk. A thrift store, find I'd sanded, smooth its surface, warm under my hands. I'd started a blog, nothing fancy, just a space to write about family, about feeling unseen, my words spilling out in the quiet of midnight. The first post went up last night, raw and unpolished, and already a few strangers had commented their stories echoing mine tales of being overlooked, of finding their own way. It wasn't much, but it felt like a bridge connecting me to others who'd carried the same kind of hurt, their words, a lifeline I hadn't expected. The next day, I met Piper, my new neighbor, in the hallway, her arms full of paint cans, her smile bright as she balanced them precariously. She invited me to a community art class, her voice warm, unguarded, and I said yes, surprising myself with the ease of it. That evening I sat among strangers in a brightly lit room, my brush dipping into reds and blues, no plan. Just motion, the paint slick under my fingers. I painted a horizon jagged but opened the colors bleeding into each other, and when Piper leaned over whispering, "That's bold," I laughed soft and real, the sound foreign but welcome. Later in Dr. Hayes's office, I sank into the quilted couch, the room smelling of lavender, calming and sharp. We talked about worth, how I'd tied mine to my parents' choices for so long, measuring myself against their love. "You're building something new," she said. Her pen still, her eyes steady. "What does Harper want?" I paused, the question simple but vast, like a sky opening up. "I want to be enough," I said, my voice steady, the words solid for the first time, and I believed them, felt them settle in my bones. That night I walked to my balcony, the city humming below its lights, a constellation of lives I'd never know. I leaned against the railing, the metal cool under my palms, the air crisp with the faint scent of rain. I thought of Mom's laugh, bright as bells, Dad's quiet nods when I'd show him my sketches, the family I'd loved so fiercely, flaws and all. They'd shaped me, but they didn't own me, not anymore. I closed my eyes, letting the breeze brush my face, and whispered to no one, "I'm here." It wasn't loud, wasn't grand, just true, a truth I'd earned. I turned back inside my bare feet, cool against the hardwood, and left the balcony door open, the night air trailing me like a promise, soft and alive. The air at the family reunion was thick with summer heat, the kind that sticks to your skin, leaving a sheen of sweat on your neck. I stood by a picnic table, a plastic cup of lemonade sweating in my hand, the ice melting into a watery pool. Cousins chased kids through the grass, their laughter sharp and fleeting, while aunts and uncles swapped stories under a sagging canopy. Caleb was there across the lawn, his shoulders hunched, talking to an uncle about refinancing the store, his voice low, strained. He looked older, the weight of his choices carving lines into his face. His eyes tired, not the bright spark I remembered. Our eyes met, and he gave a small nod, not warm, but not hostile. Either a gesture of truce, fragile but real. I nodded back, a silent agreement to let the past rest, at least for today, under this heavy July sun. I'd driven to my parents' graves that morning, a quiet cemetery tucked behind a church, the air smelling of fresh-cut grass and earth. I brought a letter, one I'd written late at night, my pen scratching out words I'd never said aloud, the ink smudging under my fingers. I knelt by their headstones, the grass damp under my knees, the stone cold against my palm, and read it to them, my voice steady, despite the lump in my throat. "I forgive you," I said, "but I'm not yours to define anymore." I folded the paper, its edges soft, and tucked it under a stone, a pressed wildflower slipping out its petals bright against the gray. I walked away, the morning sun warm on my back, a quiet warmth spreading through me like the first light after a long night. Back at the reunion, Jocelyn found me, her laugh cutting through the chatter, bright and grounding. She handed me a plate of potato salad, her eyes bright, her curls bouncing as she moved. "You look different," she said, tilting her head like you're standing taller, like you're carrying less. I smiled, setting the plate down on the table, the plastic fork wobbling. "Maybe I am," I said, my voice soft but sure. I'd started running in the mornings, not far, just a loop around my block, the rhythm of my sneakers against pavement grounding me, my breath steadying with each step. It wasn't about fitness. It was about moving forward, claiming the morning as mine. My blog had grown 2 comments pouring in from people who'd felt invisible in their own families, their words raw, honest, a chorus of shared pain. I read each one sometimes late into the night, my laptop's glow the only light in the room, their stories weaving a net of connection I hadn't expected, a reminder I wasn't alone. At home, I'd hung a new sketch above my couch, a simple line drawing of a woman looking up, her face half in shadow, half in light, her eyes open to the sky. I'd drawn it after a run, my hands still sweaty, needing to capture that feeling of becoming, of stepping into myself. The reunion buzzed around me, voices overlapping, but I slipped away to a quiet corner, sitting on a bench under a maple tree, its leaves rustling in the breeze. I closed my eyes, letting the sounds fade the world, narrowing to the warmth of the wood beneath me. I wasn't the daughter who'd begged for love anymore, not the one who'd measured her worth by their choices. I was Harper, and that was a start, a seed planted, ready to grow. I left the reunion early, driving home with the windows down, the evening air cool against my face, carrying the faint scent of honeysuckle from the roadside. My apartment greeted me with its familiar quiet, the soft glow of a lamp I'd left on casting shadows across the hardwood. I kicked off my shoes, the floor cool under my feet, and walked to the kitchen, pulling a mug from the cupboard, its handle chipped but familiar. As the kettle hummed, its steam rising in soft curls, I opened my laptop, the blog's dashboard showing new comments, stories of heartbreak and resilience from people I'd never meet, their words a quiet hum of connection. One caught my eye, a woman who wrote about choosing herself after years of family silence. Her story so close to mine it ached. I typed a reply, my fingers quick, thanking her for sharing my words, simple but true. It wasn't just words. It was a thread tying us together across miles, across pain. I'd started volunteering at a local community center, teaching an art class for kids on weekends, their small hands clutching brushes with fearless abandon. Their laughter, bright and unfiltered, reminded me of a joy I'd buried, a lightness I'd forgotten I could feel. One girl, shy with braids, gave me a drawing last week, a wobbly sun with my name scrawled in crayon, its lines uneven but bold. I pinned it to my fridge, its colors bright against the steel, a small beacon in my kitchen. In therapy, Dr. Hayes asked me to name what I carried now, not from my parents, but from myself, her voice calm, her eyes steady. I thought for a moment, my fingers tracing the quilt's patches, then said hope. Not the kind that waits for others to change, but the kind that grows from choosing my own path, from building something new. She smiled, her notebook closed, and I felt it, a quiet pride, like a seed breaking through soil, reaching for light. I framed a photo that night, one Jocelyn took at the art class. Me laughing, paint smudged on my cheek, surrounded by kids, their faces bright with focus. It went in that crooked wooden frame, the one I'd made years ago, now holding a moment that was wholly mine, a snapshot of a life I was choosing. I stood back, my tea warm in my hands, and looked at it, really looked, the colors vivid, the joy real. My parents had loved me in their flawed, uneven way, but their love wasn't my worth, not anymore. I was enough, not because they saw it, but because I did, because I'd fought to see it. The lesson wasn't loud or grand. It was simple, carved from pain and time, polished by every choice I'd made to keep going. You don't need someone else's approval to be whole. You choose yourself every day, and that choice builds a life worth living. I sipped my tea, the steam brushing my lips, and felt the truth settle, soft as a sigh, solid as the ground beneath me. What's a moment you chose yourself when you realized your worth wasn't tied to someone else's choices? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, give it a like, subscribe for more journeys like mine, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to healing, to finding our own light, one step at a time.